Oh, hello everybody. Ooh. Welcome to the. I know it's those end credits. They need trimming a bit actually. Hello everybody. Welcome to Chris. I do believe this is our first Wild Portishead live of the year, isn't it?
Well, unless there's been one and I didn't know about it. Yeah, no, this is definitely the first one. Yep. Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to you.
Absolutely. Right, we've got two very important guests in the green room at the moment, the virtual green room. So shall we crack on with some wildlife news, and then we can bring them in to talk about the meat and potatoes of tonight's topic?
Yes. Well, I mean, this week has been dominated by news from around the country of rewilding maybe gone wrong or maybe deliberate, and that is the fact that 4 lynxes were put out in the Cairngorms, and 3 were captured, and I believe 1 has died. That's a great shame, and that caused an absolute foray on social media with people saying this is just irresponsible, or this is a great idea, we need lynx. So unfortunately, what's happened has actually meant that there's a big split now between the people who say lynxes are a good idea and people who say, hang on a minute, what are we doing this for? So it's all very, very interesting. Me personally, I'm in favor. I mean, I've tried to see them in Sweden, even if they've got radio tracking equipment on. Do you know what? We were probably about 20 meters away, according to the receiver. Saw them. And that's how they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be easy to catch. So quite clearly the animals that went out obviously were already tame. The other big thing that's happened, Jonathan, and we've put it up on the Wild Portishead site, is the fact that the government now seem to be saying, and it's a rewilding thing, is that they're not going to give the clearance for beaver release. Now, what that actually means is that at the moment, what you've got is quite a lot of beavers in captivity, not in captivity, but in enclosures. Yeah. So let's say, for instance, on Exmoor in the National Trust area, the Forest of Dean, what they've done is built big enclosures to study how they react to the environment there. And the plan has always been that once the science has been done, they get released. Now, that's the proper way to do it. Absolutely. So all it needs is government to give the okay. But the government have decided that because they think this was a conservative government idea, they ain't going to give permission. So go and have a look at our Facebook page. You'll see my comment on there, and also Jonathan, fill in the communique with the MP.
Yeah, well, we have been in contact with our MP, and we've expressed our dissatisfaction at this. I'm just trying to find the news story, because a government spokesperson said something to the effect that they hadn't made their minds up whether or not they were going to do it or not. But no, I can't find the news story now, Chris. It's disappeared somewhere. But yeah, they're sitting on the fence a bit on this one at the moment. But if it is going to be that petty, that is a massive letdown for nature, because nature should rise above petty party politics.
All politics. And didn't we have that very discussion with all of our potential MPs when we did the hustings?
Yep.
And didn't they all agree that that's the way forward? And I'll say one thing before we come off topic, and that is that if this is because of jealousy that the others were debating it or about to push it through, then the obvious thing is, why haven't they got rid of the badger cull? Because that is really a Conservative thing.
Yep. Absolutely, Chris. Right. Shall we crack on? We have two guests sat in the green room here, and we are delighted to be joined tonight by Mr. Roger Whitfield and Mr. Paul Gardner. Gents, would you like to announce to the viewing public your roles within the councils?
Shall I go first?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jonathan and Chris, for inviting me along to your live stream tonight. I am currently the chair of Portishead Town Council, and I'm an executive member on North Somerset Council, and my portfolio covers, amongst other things, adult services and stronger communities, which hides a number of different things that I do in there. But basically, it's adult social care, town and parish liaison, and the help desk and complaint system at North Somerset. All of that falls within my portfolio.
You must be busy, mate.
It does keep me busy, yes.
Yeah, he is quite busy. Paul Gardner, I'm a town councillor. I've on and off been a town councillor for the last 5 or 6 years, but I guess I've done a lot of work on the neighbourhood plan, which you'll no doubt talk about later on, and I've been badgering North Somerset to hand Slade Road field over to the community for the last 6 years, I think. And we did a consultation with the town council 2 or 3 years ago. So obviously that's something I'm quite passionate about, making that happen. Although obviously we seem to run into some difficulty, which we'll come to later. Yeah.
Well, the irony is that a year ago today, to the exact very day, Portishead Town Council released a press statement to say Slade Road field saved from development. Now, for those of you who are unaware of where Slade Road is, it's, guess what, folks? It's Slade Road, but it's the old sports pitch that used to be part of the Portishead Primary School, and it's the infamous sloping pitch, as you can see from that image there. So if we have a look at a satellite shot, it's that big green patch slightly to the left of the center of the pic there. I'll isolate it. Now, that area of land within that white border is owned by North Somerset Council. The little spit of land to the left of that is owned by Portishead Town Council, which we'll come to as well this evening. Essentially, this year, North Somerset Council have announced a U-turn on handing it over to Portishead Town Council. Now, they took a full vote on this back in January last year and voted to hand it over to Portishead Town Council. Now it seems that they're having a rethink. We will cover that this evening, but here is the sticking point for wanting to develop that area of land in the middle. Is your access points are downside, or it is Lily's Orchard coming off Slade Road. Here is an illustration of downside. The maximum width of the road is pretty much a standard 16 feet, but with cars parked there, it is 9 feet. Your starter for 10, your problem is most construction vehicles are wider than 9 feet. The only other access, we'll come to Lily's Orchard in a second. Like I say, you've got that area at the top, which is owned by Portishead Town Council, where we've got the splendid new play area, which has been installed by Portishead Town Council. Again, if you were trying to get construction traffic up there, you'd have to get rid of the play area because the width of the path there is only 11 feet. Go around the corner to Lily's Orchard, which on the map there was that area at the bottom. Lily's Orchard, you've got this gap between two houses that you could potentially put a road through to access Slade Road Field. But there's always a but with this. You've got on the right there, you've got a very narrow area between two houses. And guess what? It is barely wider than the width of a construction vehicle. So how do you square this? It's clearly unsuitable for development, which is why North Somerset Council, after God knows how many years of trying to interest developers, handed it over to Portishead Town Council last year. Two-part question, gents, is one, how does North Somerset Council have the authority to perform that U-turn? But secondly, actually, we'll go for that one first of all. How can they perform a vault fast like this?
So I guess this one falls to me, as I'm on North Somerset Council, and it is a really good question there, Jonathan, how this can happen. And I guess first of all we have to look at what's happened. So as you said, about a year ago, North Somerset said that this area of land was to come off the development list and was to be handed across to Portishead Town Council. And when that happened, Portishead Town Council contacted North Somerset to gain access and to start to open negotiations on the transfer of the land. And to all intents and purposes, that was a done deal. The full council had voted on it, ratified it. It was going through. Later on in that same year, North Somerset came back with a valuation for the land for its full commercial value if it was to be developed. Now, obviously, the plans that Portishead Town Council had in place was not to develop that for housing, so that was probably an inappropriate valuation. But I asked them all the same to make that offer to Portishead Town Council because the council had agreed that this should be offered to Portishead Town Council. That still hasn't happened. So as far as we're concerned from what happened in that original North Somerset meeting, Portishead Town Council are still waiting for North Somerset to give them a formal offer to transfer the land to them at whatever value they see fit to transfer the land at, I guess. We all have ideas of what's reasonable on that. And I think we're talking of a substantial in excess of £1 million valuation as it stands at the moment for an area of land that they say will take 23 houses. So that's the backdrop of where we were. And then, as you know, before Christmas, there was a North Somerset live meeting online where members of the public, yourselves, I think, asked questions of some of the executive members, who then said that they had done a U-turn on this and that it was back on the development list. So this had been discussed. I won't deny that it had already been discussed in a number of meetings, that due to the numbers of households that the government are saying North Somerset have to supply, it was discussed whether or not it was appropriate to put this area back onto the development list. I think everyone knows my thoughts on that. I didn't think it was appropriate to do it, but I don't get the final say in these things. So when they said they've done a U-turn, my understanding is that what they've done is they've put it back on the list for consultation to go into the local plan when that goes back out to consultation and publication. That's not to say that it couldn't be removed from that list at some stage, but it's back on that list. But that doesn't mean that this is a done deal at this stage. Now, because I knew we were going to discuss this, I thought I would take the opportunity to have a word with Mike Bell and ask him what was in his mind when he declared that we'd done a U-turn in that meeting. I got a response from him about a week ago to say that it was a very difficult situation due to the significant financial valuation and the pressures upon the council, and that he would look into this and come back to me. So as yet, he hasn't come back to me with an explanation of how he believes that the executive members can overrule the full council. And I'm not sure they can. I think to do this, there would probably have to be a motion back to full council to have it reconsidered with them. But no one's confirmed that yet. I thought I might have had confirmation before this show, but unless it's arrived in a couple of minutes,
it's fact, Roger. Yeah, they can't take it. They can't not offer it to Portishead unless there is another vote of the district council. Otherwise, it'll be constitutional.
That's the assumption I'm working on at this stage. Yes.
Yeah, it would be unconstitutional. So I did quite a lot of work on the constitution a while ago. So yeah, so they can't just do that without a full council vote. So yeah.
The one observation I would make, sorry to cut in there, but the one observation I would make is that if North Somerset Council are now saying we've had to put it back on the development list because of financial pressures, how did they not see those financial pressures a year ago when they offered to hand it over to Portishead Town Council? That doesn't make sense.
I guess there's two things there, because it's financial pressures and the additional burden of the houses that the government are asking us to zone land for as such. The financial pressures, I mean, let's be honest, this is local government. There are always financial pressures. Local government is always short of money. But that got significantly worse after this decision was made. So I can see that, and it got significantly worse very quickly with very little warning as well, mainly due to the pressures of adult social care and children's as well. And some of those pressures, unfortunately, we forecast the best that we can, but sometimes strange things happen that fall outside of the forecast. So yeah, I guess that's the situation. They didn't have a formal valuation on the land at the time, but you know what, I'm pretty sure there are people in North Somerset who know what land's worth, who could have put a valuation on that and given them at least a steer on it. But I think we get back to what you said in the introduction here. This has been on the development plan for an awful long time, and yet nobody wants to develop it. Why is that? Lack of access or poor access to it? Probably the unknowns of the unlevel sites as well. You can take a valuation, can't you? How many square feet is it or square meters is it? Multiply it by this amount. That's the value of the land. But the real value of the land is what someone will pay. This has been on the market for an awful long time, and currently what people will pay is sod all. So what is the value of that land? Is it in excess of £1 million, or is it worth, I don't know, what the same as a paddock?
There's so many. Can I cut in? There's so many questions to this. The thing that's irking me is something that was said right at the beginning of this, and that is, it's virtually seems to me that North Somerset Council will end up saying to Portishead Town Council, right, this is what we want for it, pay for it, and you can have it. Now, that, to me, the only loser in this are the public. And if that belongs, that land, and I'm going to be really naive here, but if that land belongs to North Somerset Council, it belongs to us.
Mm-hmm.
We are the people.
Yep.
I agree entirely with it.
And if it belongs to us, it also belongs to Portishead Town Council, and therefore the transfer should be at zero value.
Exactly.
I think Paul was probably going to agree with that, or say
yeah,
that.
I mean, just a little history lesson on it. Yeah, I mean, it used to be owned by Portishead Urban District Council, and then it was transferred at zero cost to Woodspring, and then through to North Somerset. So effectively, they received an asset for zero. So they are trying to sell it back to us for 1.5 million. Well, to me, it's morally reprehensible. Yeah.
Well, you know as well as I do, the public will wear that.
Yeah, well, of course they won't. Why would any normal person wear that? It's just obscene, really. Isn't it? So,
it's just bonkers. That's like the big loser in this will be the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And wildlife.
There is a procedure for transfer of assets between councils. I believe it's called community asset transfer, and that's where one council will normally transfer an asset to another, where that council maybe has a community use for it or a community backed use for it, at zero value or at a peppercorn or whatever is agreed, but certainly not at the commercial value. And you'll hear from North Somerset and certain people down there that they have a responsibility to the taxpayer to maximise their assets, and that this is enshrined in the law of best value, and therefore they have no alternative but to sell this at full market value. And that's not true. There is a law on best value that has to be followed unless you are doing a community asset transfer between councils, in which case you can ignore the law of best value. So there will be a lot of things said about this over the coming months or years, but be certain that one does not stack up. They do not have to sell this at 1.5 million.
I think the other thing that that rankles in all this is 4-5 years ago, when this new administration came in, the first thing they did was they announced a climate emergency and went very big on what they called rewilding. So, you know, nature was very much at the forefront of that particular, you know, campaign that they had. Here we have a field which has essentially, because it's been left to its own devices, has rewilded itself. And so its potential to actually be to actually be enhanced for nature and for human interaction with nature is absolutely palpable. And yet, here we have a district council saying no. Sorry, a county council saying no. We'd rather build on it, and it just that doesn't make sense.
We should probably mention biodiversity net gain, because when we talk about planning now, there is a requirement to have a net gain in biodiversity in any development that goes in. So here we have something which I'm sure ticks all the boxes for biodiversity at the moment. Yep. And I wonder how putting 23 houses on this site is going to improve the biodiversity on that site, which is now incumbent upon any developer to do. So I wonder if that makes it even more difficult for somebody to develop as housing when they have to end up with a net gain in biodiversity on a site which is already very biodiverse. I think it's impossible. They would have to buy credits elsewhere for that. And I'm not sure that the purchase of biodiversity credits, like the purchase of carbon credits, is a very moral way of doing business.
And there's no land to do BNG on, so it would have to be outside the area. So that's of no use to the local people or the local wildlife.
That's right.
I think there are some areas that North Somerset are looking at in Portishead to do biodiversity net gain on and sell credits on.
If BNG lasts past this Parliament.
Of course. That's the proviso that goes on absolutely everything, isn't it?
We've got some questions here. We've got one from viewer Laura. She says, when did the 2-year clock start ticking? When the vote happened, Steve Bridger said 2 years to do something meaningful, or they take it back, or words to that effect. And will they stop the clock while all this is going on? So
yeah, I can answer that one. That one's very simple. I was in the meeting, sat very close to Steve Bridger at the time, glaring at him whilst he tried to insert a time limit into something that North Somerset have done nothing with for years and years on end. I could understand what he was saying. He was saying, like, if we're going to hand it to Portishead, they do nothing with it, we should have a clause where we could take it back. The fact of the matter is that they haven't even started handing it to Portishead. So any theoretical time limit that he put on that hasn't even started counting yet. But much more importantly, he didn't raise it as an amendment. It wasn't seconded. It wasn't voted on. It was his personal opinion that he gave in that meeting. There is no time clock ticking on this one. It was just his personal opinion that he thought maybe there should be something built in, but it was never built in.
We've got a question here, which is why has Slade Road Fields returned on the call for sites list? How long will North Somerset Council keep putting this on the call for sites listing when clearly no one has shown interest? And what happens when it again shows no interest? What's the limited time before you reconsider giving it back to the town? And I'm just going to say that when Lily's Orchard was developed, in the last 10 years, surely that would have been the perfect opportunity for North Somerset Council to say to a developer, look, there's an adjoining field. You're already kind of clogging up Slade Road with construction traffic. Do you want to buy it and knock through and build more houses? Nobody did. They limited themselves to Lily's Orchard. But yeah, sorry, that question. So go back. That question is why has Slade Road Fields returned on the call for sites list, and how long will North Somerset keep putting it on this list when nobody has shown interest?
Yeah. So I mean, to answer that one, I think we probably have to look at the number of houses that North Somerset is being asked to provide land for, which I think is 1,500 houses a year for the next 15 years. I mean, it's a substantial sum. To put that in some form of context, I think the most houses North Somerset has ever managed to build in any one year is 900.
That's great.
And those are exceptional years. The average is more like 700 or 800, I think. So it's a massive additional number of houses, and I can understand the people who have to put the plan together are looking for every scrap of land that they can put in there, because the crux of the matter is, if you do not provide a local plan with an adequate number of houses in, then no one has to follow what's in your local plan. And that means that you will get development requests for the Greenbelt area and all the areas that no one wants developed around Portishead and North Somerset. So this is part of a defence mechanism to keep the development within reasonable zones. Now, how they can each area that goes onto this list has to be a developable area, somewhere where it's you can't just put any old piece of land and just hope that it will be developed. So I wonder how this made it onto the list as a developable piece of land, because of course no one's wanted to. And you're exactly right, Jonathan. If it was ever going to be developed, that was the opportunity when they built that new road through and put those extra houses in to develop the whole area in one hit. And I would hazard a guess the reason that they didn't do it is because it's too troublesome for people to actually develop that area. I feel as if we're arguing over a piece of land that they believe is worth £1.5 million and will fit 23 houses, when everyone knows that that's not the case. It feels absolutely pointless. I would rather we found another area of land that would fit those extra 23 houses and leave this as a nature reserve or a wild a rewilding area, or maybe put some other facilities, leisure facilities into that for walks and things like that, or quiet zones. But I'm sure that Portishead is big enough. I'm 100% positive that we could fit another 23 houses down on the proposed Wyndham Way site. So the density is relatively high on that proposed site. Another 23 wouldn't be out of the way, would it? Sometimes it's beyond belief why we spend forever arguing about these little bits of land that no one wants to develop anyway.
Yeah, I think the other, obviously there's the housing angle, but the other angle is the money angle, and they just see it as an opportunity to fill their budget hole problem at the moment, and hopefully Portishead Town Council will be gullible enough to pay them a huge amount of money, and they say thank you very much. But as you're saying, Chris, it's not, it's the people's land anyway, so clearly we're not going to do that. We're not that gullible. But so yeah, and why would we? So that's the other driver for them. They just see it, we can make some money, which is very sad, really, because it's a precious piece of land. So.
It's the layout of the land there. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the wildlife, and it's quite stunning at the moment, because of course you've got at least 3 species of songbird on build up to breeding. I'm saying that deliberately in case either of you has any wink at the fact that cutters might be going in suddenly. So the breeding season is just about to get going, and the Portishead Town Council bit as well is exceptionally good at the moment. And that's basically because it's been Martin's on so I think my vision, and we've all got visions on Slade Road, which is why Jonathan, when the announcement was made, Jonathan quite rightly tried to get everyone together and say, right, all visions in the melting pot, so to speak. But my vision is, and Roger touched on this as well, is somewhere where people can go, they can hear birdsong, and they can be in a quiet place, relatively quiet place, because they are almost in the middle of the urban area. There can be shelters made there for people to sit out the way, and very importantly, get some good mental well-being. I don't need to go into that. We all know what that's about. But also at the same time, that it's somewhere where perhaps groups can meet. That there could be one of these. They're cropping up in a lot of community places now. They're open barns basically, and people in those. They haven't got any sides on them or anything like that. There's bird boxes on them. So, it's always been my vision that it's something for people and wildlife and people. I'm putting them both around deliberately. And obviously towards that bottom where it's really wet, there's your community orchard.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course, historically, it used, before it was a football field, it was an orchard. So
isn't that the irony that adjoining that you've got Lily's orchard, not a single tree there?
Yeah. I think that's why it makes it such a biodiverse place, because it was an orchard, and then I think there are still bees and stuff like that which are around from historically. It's been a great place for wildlife, because of that. So.
Got a question here from Tom. Tom says, "Can I ask what stops the Slade Road field being considered as greenbelt?"
Interesting.
That's a good question.
Isn't greenbelt a buffer zone to the urban area?
Yeah. I mean, there are other designations, so I'll have to double check. But if you want to protect it, you can designate it as a local green space, which doesn't give it quite as much protection as a greenbelt. But as you rightly say, Chris, greenbelt is really like as the name suggests, a sort of belt around an urban area to stop it sprawling into the next urban area. But there are other designations. Other designations called local green spaces, which in the neighbourhood plan we did pick up quite a few of those. I'd have to check what the status of Slade Road is. It doesn't give you quite as much protection, and as we know, greenbelt doesn't give you full protection because Bristol Airport is smack in the middle of the greenbelt, but they always get dispensation to increase the footprint of the airport within the greenbelt. So
I'm just trying to find the news story today. It was North Somerset Council have in principle approved a planning application on greenbelt for I think it's an American medical centre.
Down in Long Ashton.
Yeah. And there the argument was that, well, where else is it going to go? And so greenbelt land is being offered up for potential development. So it's greenbelt is by no means it's not a it's not a kind of a barrier to development. We've got another question here, which is it's about floodplains as well, which is one of the things that they were talking about Kingston Seymour with EDF, and that is the question was asked at a North Somerset Council meeting on the 14th of Jan. Will there be guarantees that that development won't be going on floodplain or designated greenbelt? A question continued with regards to floodplain 3 and the point that North Somerset Council and central government would not build on floodplain areas. However, if much of North Somerset is on floodplain areas with no brown belt areas, where do you develop?
Still, that's the nub of the problem, really, because the 1,500 houses per year target is just completely unrealistic. As Roger said, North Somerset's never got anywhere near that, and we're not between a rock and a hard place. We're between the Bristol Channel and the Mendips, which is an area of national beauty, plus all of the greenbelt, and there just isn't enough space within North Somerset to build all those houses. So, that is difficult.
Flood zone 3 is quite an awkward designation as well, because you say, okay, we're not going to build anything on flood zone 3. That's fine. Half of Portishead's built on flood zone 3. Yeah. So there are areas in Portishead which are in flood zone 3 that are up for development, and of course, obviously, I'll Wyndham Way, because that's the obvious area that's right on the edge of Marina. That's definitely flood zone 3. There's no two ways about it. Yet what the government said is no development in flood zone 3 that isn't part of an existing urban development. And the reasoning behind that was that if you've already got an existing urban development like Portishead that's in flood zone 3, naturally that will have been protected. So we have sea defences to protect it. So it would be nonsensical to say you can't build any more houses in that protected area. So the flood zone 3 that they're saying won't be built on is new flood zone 3 where there's been no development before. And that will be because that's unprotected, and that would require the government to put additional sea defences in, if not today, in the very near future, to stop it from flooding. So that would just ramp up the costs on national government, which obviously comes out of all of our taxes, if we were to develop those areas, which is why so many of those areas are off the list. But down in Western, Clevedon, Portishead, surrounding areas where there is already housing in a flood zone area that's protected, there is an opportunity to get more housing in there.
I think one of the questions a lot of residents in Portishead will probably ask is it an unfair perception that Portishead always seems to bear the brunt of development in North Somerset?
Oh, I've heard this one before, Paul. I think you've probably heard it before as well. Look, honestly, we have taken so many houses over the last 25 years, 30 years in Portishead. We had a massive power station. Some people will remember the big brick chimneys.
Yep.
And the phosphorus works. We no longer have those.
No.
And I think actually what we've got there now is probably an improvement on that. So let's not say that all development's bad, but we really feel as if we've taken our fair share in Portishead. But look at where the development's going now. Look at the local plan. Weston-super-Mare is taking the vast bulk of it. And they are starting to see the problems that we started to see when you develop an area. Try and get out of Weston in rush hour. Try and get in rush hour. Try and get onto that one motorway junction that services the people that are already there, and then add another 10 or 20,000 houses onto that and see how that goes. So, but at the moment, the vast amount of what's going in is going to end up in Weston-super-Mare. So yes, we've had our fair share, and there's not much more for us, but there will be for other areas.
We just got a comment here from Pan Graphics who says, not a lot any potential developer could do if downside residents agree to park all their cars on the road rather than on their drives, is there? Well, this does come back to that image that I shared at the beginning of the show, which is, that was a photograph I took today. Yeah, I mean, how do you enforce that? I mean, it would, you'd have to start telling people you can't park your cars on the road. I just don't see how it works.
I think that might be why they can never get anyone interested, because the developers look at it and just look at exactly what you're looking at and go, this is going to be a nightmare. So
yeah. Chris,
if you can't get your lorries down there as a developer, your other option is to park your lorries somewhere else and use smaller vehicles to shuttle to and from the lorries. So it doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it very, very difficult and much, much more expensive. And if it's much more expensive, then the value of the land is a lot less than it's currently valued at. So it impacts back on that same thing, doesn't it? if you can't get proper access, you can work around it, but it just costs you too much money.
If they Roger and Paul, if they were going to build now, hypothetically, let's say they had planning permission and 23 houses are going in, how many of those are low cost homes?
I think they're all supposed to be social housing, but whether that's low cost or not is a sort of moot point. But
still, are they?
Whether they're obviously the word that's trotted out as affordable, but that's obviously in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? So
yeah,
it would be social housing basically.
We'd be looking at 30 to 50% according to the government, isn't it? North Somerset are around about 30%. The government are saying, well, if it's a greenfield site, it should be 50% social housing, or should we say not social housing, affordable housing. So there's a split between social and affordable. I'm not sure either are truly affordable.
No,
isn't that to kind of like broaden the discussion out a bit at the moment? Isn't that part of the problem why we have such a housing crisis in this country? Is because houses get built, but they are beyond the means of a lot of people to be able to buy them. And yet every time we get round to doing more housing developments, you see on the glossy posters outside, exclusive, executive, it's all being priced up here. How do people afford them?
Well, they can't. I mean, I was reading an article the other day. I think people on sort of lower middle incomes are the worst off of almost every country in Europe, and it's because of the cost of housing. So the salaries might be and the wages might be the same as in Latvia or Germany, but it's the cost of housing there is so much cheaper. So it's a national problem. The housing market doesn't work in the UK, does it? So
we had this recently in Clevedon, of course. The Castlewood site, as you probably know, is being emptied out and is up for development in Clevedon. And I don't know if you know, but Clevedon's housing needs assessment says that what it really needs more than anything else is small 1 and 2 bedroom apartments or properties. So this has gone out for somebody to come up with a plan on it, and it was a head in your hands moment when the plan came back with 3 and 4 bedroom executive homes with single and double garages, large front and back gardens, and a hotel, and a very small block of affordable housing, as they say in the corner. And I looked at it, as did a number of my colleagues, and we literally just sat there and went, where did that come from? And you know where it comes from, don't you? The developers believe that their best opportunity of making money is to sell 3 and 4 bedroom executive homes. And therefore they said this is the only way that we can make money on this site is if we sell these homes. We need a change in the way that the system works.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think leaving developers in charge of it is the way forward. But that's down to what is now the Labour government to come up with some plans for it. I'd like to see proper council housing being developed back again in this country. Really affordable housing, yeah. The sort of housing that if you're on benefits, you can still afford to live in. That's what I call affordable housing, something that reaches up at that level, the way council houses always used to be. I'm not sure we're going to get it, not even from a Labour government, but we can keep our fingers crossed that they might do something in that direction at some point in the relatively near future.
Do you know what, Roger? One of the things that still baffles me is when you look at the post-war housing boom in this country. And we've still got examples of them around the area, prefabs.
Yeah.
They were just seen as an easy way to get people into houses. Surely the technology has improved over the last 50, 60, 70 years where we can build modern prefabs and we don't have to go through this expensive bricks and mortar process. We can build modern prefabs. And there we go. We're actually moving the housing situation along a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, technology's there. There are modular homes that you can just drop in, and obviously they're eco-friendly, energy efficient, all that kind of thing. So yeah, why we've got to go to Persimmon for them to build another housing estate with 3-bedroom brick houses, I've no idea. But it's the system, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a question. Sorry, Chris. We've got a question here from Tom. He says, "Is the access via Adlington House residential home a public or private driveway?" I think it's. I'm just seeing. I think it's a mixture. It is private, although it's public when it comes to people on foot. But in terms of motor traffic, I think it's private. But then once you get past Adlington House, you're onto Portishead Town Council ground, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I'd imagine there's some sort of covenant which gives people access across the land, but we'd have to check. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a public right of way across it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the driveway part up to it is actual highway land. I think that's probably private land, but there is definitely a public right of way across it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chris, any more questions?
Yeah, I was trying to get in for a few then. Yeah, but I don't think is my microphone working?
Yeah, your microphone's working fine.
Okie dokie. Right. Well, I noticed on Facebook we also have Laura there talking about the threats to Portishead Down. She saw a draft for a potential 1,200 houses to be literally smacked up against Western Bigwood on Portishead Down. Now that is our green belt.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, with a call for sites, and as we know, pretty much every field around Western Bigwood is owned, but has got some sort of developer interest on it, and no doubt some of them will put in new proposals in this call for sites. So we'll have to get the community together again. As we know, we've got a neighbourhood plan which gives us a bit of protection. We, as a town council, we carried out a biodiversity study a couple of years ago now. You were there, Chris, weren't you? You walked across the downs with the company that did that. Again, obviously, we can shout at the developers, but you also need the data as well. You need to prove to them that it's a special area, and as you rightly said a long time ago, Chris, the fulcrum of it is, of course, Western Bigwood as a triple SI and an ancient woodland, and then also the way to counter it is it's part of this strategic Gordona Valley corridor from over the estuary through to Clevedon and down to the Mendips. And obviously the wildlife needs those corridors to sort of be able to exist. So yeah, we've got plenty of arguments to protect it, but I guess we've got to see what the call for site says, and no doubt we'll need to galvanise if there are, as we expect, developers to want to do something. We'll have to galvanise the community again and make all those arguments. But it is key that we've got the data and the logic, because the planning system is it's not a popularity contest. You need to basically prove to the inspectors that it's a special place and why and all that kind of stuff, and justify it. So you need to have the information to back up what we all know. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the time scale for the public knowing what's been put in to the potential development areas?
I'm not sure. Do you know when call for sites is going to finish?
So I think we're still struggling to find enough sites to hit the government's targets. So we keep putting out new calls for sites. The problem is when you do a call for sites, you get plenty of people that own land putting it in saying, oh, I can take development on this, because of course it puts the value of that land through the roof. A number of the areas that come in have to be assessed to see whether or not they're viable, and an awful lot of them turn out not to be viable. So there's a big map of sites which we then have to work our way through to see whether or not they're viable. Not me, but we have the officers who work their way through all of that, doing the viability checks on them, and then that comes out in the consultation documents. But whilst we're still doing calls for sites, we're not publishing the consultation document because we're still trying to fill it up. And I think it's very important for people to understand that if we don't get enough sites into the local plan, then the areas they don't want developed will be at risk. And that's the green belt. And the developers love green belts. It's nice and easy to develop. It gives them the maximum profit, and that's where they would rather go. And whilst we're not doing our local, whilst we don't have our local plan in place, we are slowly being inundated with planning applications for developers to try and get stuff into the green belt because they think there's an opportunity to get what they want in the green belt now, whilst there's no plan in place, because if you don't have a plan, you're going to lose an appeal.
That's very concerning, because the current North Somerset local plan runs out in 2026, which is only next year. So as Roger says, unless there's a replacement for it, it becomes sort of open day for developers.
It did. The last one didn't have a 5-year supply of housing anyway, so we're still open to this. So the quicker we get the houses on the list and the plan into the government and approved, the quicker we can protect areas around North Somerset. It's horrible, isn't it? We can protect areas around North Somerset by pushing other areas forward for development where we didn't really want development anyway, where the housing needs assessment says that we don't need a development, but the government says we're not looking at your housing needs assessment, we're looking at the figures we gave you. So it's a horrible situation, but at the moment they've said if you don't approve it, we'll approve it for you. So between the sea and the Mendips, or a rock and a hard place, however you put it, that's where we are.
Chris, I think we call that a Kobayashi Maru, don't we?
Yeah.
Star Trek, I say.
We got a question here from viewer Laura. She says, so should we actually be turning our sense of urgency to protecting Portishead Down and Tower Farm then?
I think we should very soon, not today, but yeah, certainly within the next month or two. I think we should be definitely doing that.
Is that a double-edged question there from Laura? I wonder if that's, should we be concentrating on places like Slade Road when we should perhaps be concentrating on the bigger areas? Is it Laura? Is it?
Yes.
I stand to be corrected. Maybe I've just added something.
Yeah, I mean, well, we should be focusing on all of the green space areas. I mean, there aren't that many left in the town. And for people who don't know, we're talking about the Portishead settlement boundary, which is quite tightly drawn. Obviously, it does include parts of Western Bigwood, Portishead Down, but it only goes as far as before Sheepway, really. So it's not a huge area. And there's very little green space left in it. So, we got a question here from viewer Bob. You might know him. He says, can the public not get an understanding of viable sites? A map showing areas that are on the listing, the period of time it's being listed, and owners, or is this too much to ask? So yes, I think what Bob's saying is it possible to have a map or something whereby we're actually, you're actually highlighting everything in the area. So areas that are green, but that are green belt that could be under threat. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I think, well, there is a map we already produced for like 5 years ago, which is, I remember it distinctly. So I could dig that out, and it's not changed effectively. So because actually there's been very little development over the last 5 years in Portishead, of course. So.
When the consultation comes out, there will of course be a map produced. I've seen early versions of it in other meetings of viable sites, but those are viable sites which are put forwards by the owners of those sites. I'm not sure it's. I'm not sure we're allowed to say who the owners of each site are anyway. I think that's probably protected information.
No, it's not. It's not, Roger.
It might be land registry. So yeah, it could well be open, couldn't it?
It is land registry. It's public information. I mean, some of them try and hide behind things. So I remember I think it's Tower Farm. Actually, I think it is actually owned by there's basically Salmon Burgess, which is a legal firm in Bristol, which allegedly are the owner. But when you sort of go behind it, you find it's some development company based in Leicester, which are using Burgess Salmon as a sort of front, basically. So so you could find out some information, but some of it is a bit hidden. So,
but if Bob was asking, could we publish a list of all the sites that we thought were viable? I'm not sure how that would work, because currently we ask people who own areas of land to put them forward to say if they want them developed. If we were to just go out and grab every scrap of land and say whether or not it was viable for development, I'm not sure that would be an overly open and transparent process, and also I'm not sure that it would be achievable within a reasonable timescale, because there's loads and loads of small parcels of land out there which are undevelopable.
Probably viable is the wrong word. I mean, there are pieces of land which we can consider would be under threat, because they'll be the same ones that were under threat 5 years ago.
Over the last 12 months, Jenna Ho Maris and myself have been doing some work on small areas on which real affordable housing could be built, not just in Portishead, but in the whole North Somerset area, and areas which developers don't bother with because they're not big enough for them, areas which North Somerset don't bother with because they've got no real value. And there's over a couple of thousand, I think, areas. When we worked through the list, it turned out some of them were cemeteries, so that didn't feel like a very good idea. Some were play parks. But there are areas out there where development is available, and I mean we were talking earlier, weren't we, about prefabricated houses, and we looked to do that as well. And the resistance we keep coming up against, and whether this is a reasonable thing or not, people turn around and say we don't want low quality housing. And therefore, I think this is part of the problem, that when you talk prefab, people think low quality, and until that mindset changes, you're really pushing back against a big wave of people who think that that's inappropriate development.
I think my response to that would be there are people in and around Avonmouth who still cherish their prefabs because they were just solidly built houses. Right, to answer Chris's question, Laura says, only because the conversation tonight seemed very relaxed about anything actually happening at Slade Road, given how little interest there is. I'm not relaxed about it, Laura. I'm quite anxious about it, but we will continue to push on this.
Was she referring back to a previous question where she said we should be concentrating on other areas? I think maybe the two went in together, and I think Paul answered that one anyway, which was there's a number of areas we should be concentrating on, not just one or the other. We should be looking to protect all of them.
Last question for tonight, and that's from Tom, and he says, at risk of going off topic, what's the future for Old Mill Road? Seems there's only a handful of businesses left now.
Shall I come in there? I mean,
you did a lot of work on this some years back, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways of answering this, because as we know, Aberdeen Standard are the owners, or Phoenix Life, the insurance company. They to a couple of during COVID, really, they basically went very cold on any housing development, because they were getting very reasonable returns on their rentals. And that's been the case since. So their pension fund just said, we're making enough money on this through renting out to the businesses down there. obviously there are a lot of gaps at the moment, but everything we hear from is that, okay, there might be some gaps, but they are investing in renovating the roofs down there, and although there are gaps, they get filled quite quickly. So that's basically that's one half of it. On the other half, I mean, the long-term plan, people do need somewhere to live, and actually, if you look at although there are some jobs down there, most of them are big warehouses. There's not that many jobs, probably about 80 or something last time I looked. Obviously, still 80 jobs, but there is potential opportunity to create a lot more than 80 jobs down there in terms of some sort of mixed development with housing, and obviously it's on brownfield and so forth. So clearly, the logic would be if there was some development down there, it would help the argument for protecting the green belt and the other sort of precious areas in terms of green space. But that's all a long way off. Something like that might appear in I'd imagine in the North Somerset local plan, but remember that's a 15-year plan, so something might appear in that space.
Paul, there might be some jobs going for the new train station. Oh no, sorry, that's fully automated.
Oh, you had to mention the train station.
Oh, yeah, red card. Yeah.
Red card. Right, on that note,
are we not doing the train station now?
on that note, the conversation has hit the buffers, and we've derailed we're getting all the train jokes in.
Run out of steam.
We've run out of steam, exactly. On that note, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Roger Whitfield and Paul Gardner for joining us tonight. Big thank you to everybody who tuned in. Chris, we will be back and we'll do another live soon.
We need to do one really soon because we've got to prep for spring.
Yes.
If we want people to leave lawns
and
not to cut down scrub during the breeding season, cancers.
And also, we need to organise a public meeting or a public get-together where we can start opening out the group a bit more. I know we've talked about this in the past, but yes, that is something we've definitely got.
So there's something hopefully we're going to be doing with Paul.
Yeah.
And that's going to involve a certain bird species which comes back in about May from South Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on that note, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in tonight. Fingers crossed, we will continue to fight for Slade Road and the other areas under threat in Portishead. So we'll see what we can do. On that note, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you very, very soon. So from us all tonight.
Thanks for the invite. Have a good weekend. Yeah.